One of my interests in the world is Great Britain and Europe. I think we did have an issue. I think we did have an issue a few years ago when, sadly, the Queen Elizabeth II died, and as Queen of England. So I think that Great Britain has changed in that respect. I think we had the Conservative government, and they had an election for a new Prime Minister, Liz Truss. And I think during that process there was some kind of parliamentary procedure with the 1922 committee of the Conservative Party, and they kind of adamantly and insisted with the opposition some kind of legal protocol and procedure in Parliament which bypassed some kind of condition of the election and caused an issue of concern with the election. So I think that raised some kind of public concern with the election, and I think this was reported in the media. And I think that the election resulted in Liz Truss becoming Prime Minister. And I think that the unusual situation that occurred with this, with Liz Truss becoming Prime Minister, was her inauguration. Rather than going to Buckingham Palace to be inaugurated as Prime Minister, Queen Elizabeth II chose to move that inauguration destination to Balmoral in Scotland. That's outside of England. So I think that's never happened before in British history, for a Prime Minister to be inaugurated outside of Buckingham Palace, outside of England, rather to be inaugurated in Scotland instead. So there was some kind of issue of concern with that inauguration, whether it could be conducted in Buckingham Palace or in England and in London, or whether it should be conducted in Scotland outside of England. And the decision was made for that inauguration to be conducted outside of Buckingham Palace and in Balmoral. But the unfortunate situation with that is that when Liz Truss was inaugurated at Balmoral in Scotland, Queen Elizabeth II shortly died, shortly after that inauguration. I think it was 2 months after that inauguration, and that seems to be a short period of time following that direct inauguration of a British Prime Minister. So that seems very suspicious. It seems to be directly connected with the inauguration of a British Prime Minister, the death of Queen Elizabeth II, the monarch of England. So I think that is very concerning. But I think that she passed away with some kind of lower limb condition, a mobility issue. It was Balmoral in Scotland. I think her family visited Queen Elizabeth II. Most of her family did. I think it was Prince Andrew, Prince Philip, Prince William, Prince Harry as well, perhaps, and other royal family members. And she died there in Scotland. I think it was a lower limb condition. That's how she died. But this is very serious, because at the time of this election of a British Prime Minister, we had Rishi Sunak also contending for leadership, and he was Chancellor in the British government, and he's obviously from an Indian background. He's actually the first Indian British Prime Minister of Great Britain, Rishi Sunak. He's the first black Prime Minister of Great Britain. That's what Rishi Sunak has. I think he's been like that for 4 to 6 years. So he's Britain's first black Prime Minister. He's similar to Barack Hussein Obama, President Barack Hussein Obama of America. He's America's first black President of America. And Rishi Sunak is, Rishi Sunak is Great Britain's first black Prime Minister. So he's made political history in Great Britain, but he's obviously from an Indian background, he's a Hindu Indian background. He's an Indian national, I think. He has an Indian industrialist as a wife who's also an Indian national, so I don't think they're quite 100% British nationals. They could be half British nationals and half Indian nationals. He had an issue with American citizenship, but I think with India involved in British politics, I think there is an issue of the concern. There is an issue of concern whether India was directly involved in some kind of an assassination with Queen Elizabeth II. That's what this could have been, an assassination by India and by Rishi Sunak. It seems to be slightly different from usual and normal circumstances to have an Indian person, Rishi Sunak, involved in British politics. So I think that India is quite involved in British politics at the moment with Rishi Sunak. He's been Prime Minister, he's been a very successful Chancellor as well. And I think that there is an issue of how India is involved in British politics. I think that is an important issue because I do believe that India is involved in British politics, and that could have led to the death of Queen Elizabeth II, the involvement of India in British politics through Rishi Sunak. So I think that there could have been an issue in British government and British politics in the world where India has somehow become involved in British politics and assassinated Queen Elizabeth II, perhaps with the interest of putting Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister of Great Britain, which he ultimately accomplished. So I think there's an issue with that, but I think the Americans were also involved because I think Balmoral is American. I think it's American territory. So I think that America could be also involved in the death of Queen Elizabeth II. I believe that America has a strong connection with Scotland, and America could have had a connection with the decision to move the inauguration of Prime Minister Liz Truss from Buckingham Palace to Scotland and Balmoral. So I think America could somehow be involved in this as well, and I don't think that's very healthy for conditions. So I think that's quite concerning. But I think the other issue with the death of Queen Elizabeth II, she was Queen of England for over 70 years. She was the longest serving Queen of England. She has a long history and an interest for Great Britain and the public and the British public. So that's obviously important. And I think the fact that she died so suddenly, on unusual circumstances in Scotland is very concerning. And I think that the other concern is the fact that Prime Minister Liz Truss only served 2 months as British Prime Minister. That's quite unusual and suspicious as well. So she's the shortest serving British Prime Minister in British political history. So I think that kind of draws interest and concern with these issues, and she served 2 months and then resigned, so that's quite unusual. And I think that is somehow connected with the death of Queen Elizabeth II. So I think that's another thing that could be looked into. I think there should be a police investigation into this. There's a lot of public information about this. There could be a police investigation and maybe look at perhaps the circumstances around the death of Queen Elizabeth II, and perhaps the involvement of the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Prime Minister Liz Truss, and perhaps Conservative Party members as well. So I think that could be an important aspect to this. So I think that we do have some issue with the Conservative Party, how they're kind of managing their prime ministers. And I think that's one of my causes of concern with the British government. Thank you.